Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Since the Biden administration seized the reins of power in Washington, both Russia and Turkey have been forced to contend with a more hostile foreign environment to their interests and practices. Consequently, both strategies and tactics have seemingly altered, shifting the sands in all of the theaters these two powers are jointly present in, both diplomatically and militarily. To analyze the relations of Moscow and Ankara amid quickly changing realities, we're joined from the city of Mugla in Turkey by Mr. Yusuf Erim, who is the TRT World Editor-at-Large. Thank you for joining us. Also joining us from Central Israel is Professor Ze'ev Khanin, who is an expert on Russian and Middle Eastern studies at Bar Ilan and Ariel Universities. Thank you for joining us as well.
Pleasure to be with you.
And with me here in the studio is our TV7 analyst and host of Watchmen Talk, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, give us a broader understanding on the latest developments pertaining to this specific topic.
So obviously, Russia and Turkey are the most important and almost the only Eurasian powers. They are both straddling both continents, Europe and Asia, and they are projecting power to many directions, and they have interests in several countries adjacent to them and even further, not only in the near abroad, as the Russians call it, but also across the Mediterranean, as we have seen most recently with Turkey's policy vis-à-vis Libya. Now, President Erdoğan has now been in power for more than 18 years. And one may see a shift recently, even though it is not a declared one, from ideology to geostrategic considerations. And as we all know, historically, Turkey always feared the Russian bear. Now, several years ago, Turkey had other interests as more of a priority. And it has a troubled relationship with the European Union, of which it is not a member. It is, of course, a member in good standing of NATO, but NATO and the EU are not one and the same. However, it must have American backing if it is in trouble with the Russians. And whether this is what President Erdoğan now sees as more of a priority or not, one can see that during the first several months of this year, 2021, relations have seemingly improved with some of Turkey's rivals and adversaries in the region, with Egypt over Libya, even with Greece, which is, of course, the arch rival. Perhaps with Israel, though not over the last several days when there was tension over Jerusalem. And the United Arab Emirates, too, used to be with Egypt and Israel in the camp considered hostile by Turkey, but perhaps not anymore. So the Moscow vis-à-vis Ankara relationship is probably going a reassessment now.
Mr. Erim, I'd like to hear your take on the current perspective from Ankara's point of view. How do you see the maneuvering, the various rapprochements that have been engaged? Of course, the meeting in Egypt, the exploratory talks in Greece. There's so much happening right now that one needs a lot more than a few minutes to actually divulge everything that's been ongoing. But give us a little bit of an understanding. What is the current focus on a strategic level from Turkey's perspective?
Well, when we look at the two engagements between Turkey and Russia in the international theater, we see Libya and Syria both entering a political track. The main kinetic engagement in both countries is now over as the conflict is slowly dying down, and we're seeing some type of step taken towards a political solution, political dialogue. So this alone has been very important in lowering the stress on the Turkey-Russia front. So that's been a very important development on Turkey-Russia relations. But now there's going to be also competition for rebuilding contracts and also being able to raise their level of influence with the government in Libya, and also who's going to be in power in Syria as well. So this common notion that both sides cooperate and compete at the same time is going to continue going forward. Now, also, when we look at what's happening in the Caucasus with Armenia destabilizing, and then now also going to a election, Azerbaijan taking Nagorno-Karabakh back, and also Turkey flexing its muscles into Central Asia, that's also going to be another flashpoint between Moscow and Ankara as well. But overall, when we look at the relationship right now, it's definitely maintainable, it's sustainable, but the Biden presidency in America looks like it's going to put pressure on Turkey-Russia relationship from time to time, as Biden is going to want to rebuild the NATO coalition, and it's going to look to Turkey to be able to bring Turkey back into the NATO fold. And we see a lot of times, many people say Turkey is shifting east. Turkey's not shifting east. We hear the word strategic autonomy a lot in the European Union. Turkey's also exercising its own strategic autonomy in its foreign policy. It's centering its foreign policy. So that centering from a Western point of view looks like a shift east, when in reality, it's just hedging its bets as the world is shaping into a multipolar world.
Professor Khanin, your take on this, of course, from Moscow's perspective. What do you hear in Moscow, in Zelensky Square, as well as in the Kremlin?
If we will have into account what people say in Moscow and how they define the situation, if we will read recent analysis of the local think tanks, I would say that in principle we get the same picture as colleagues described from the point of view of Jerusalem and point of view from Ankara. The difference is that Moscow makes absolutely different conclusions, and of course these conclusions affect their position in terms of the relations with Turkey. So according to people in Russia, as far as we understand the situation, they believe that Turkey is trying to sit between two chairs, or both on the two chairs, like say in Russia, like they say in Russian. So on one hand, they believe that they're able to coordinate their behavior with Washington. On the other hand, to make ad hoc deals and agreements with Moscow. That in some way worked in the period when the previous American administration stayed in power. We can take into account the fact that even Turkey wasn't severely punished for the contract with the S-400 they signed with Moscow. So the only problem they had that Turkey was removed from the F-35 project. But on the other hand, despite quite substantial conflicts of the recent years and misunderstanding between Ankara and Moscow and Ankara and Washington, they were not severely punished. At the moment, the current Biden administration is changing the rules of the game. First of all, because of the fact that the Middle East and Black Sea, Balkanian and so on policy of the United States is different. So they believe that they're not interested in Turkey. Not in the fact, in the case that it was previously, that it will be sort of a threshold of Moscow expansion. So Americans prefer that Europeans will deal with Turkey, and they are able to afford. I'm talking about Washington, the current administration. They're able to afford implementation of the sort of ideology into their relations with Turkey. Let us remember that Biden, for instance, during the electoral campaign, they called Turkish leader autocrat, and now it's able to would like to show that he is unable to stand the so-called non-liberal regimes, including the Turkish regime. So Ankara attempts to play the Russian card and insist that only Turkey, the only non-NATO member which is able to stop Russian expansion of Kremlin, works very much in concern of their relations. So Russian experts believe that whatever happens on this track for Ankara, there is no choice to deal with Moscow, and that means that Ankara will be a junior partner in their dialogue with Moscow at the moment.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, Earlier, you said that Turkey historically was afraid of the Russian bear. However, it seems that under President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, he has seen himself an equal to Putin in many aspects. When the Russians invited Egypt to come and do a joint maneuver, a naval maneuver in the Black Sea, suddenly we saw Turkey, on the other hand, during the same period of time, doing maneuvers with Ukraine, doing maneuvers also with the Americans, but signing new agreements with Ukraine, selling unmanned aerial vehicles, which have also offensive dimensions, to the Ukrainians, and really bolstering their relations with Ukraine, which is the biggest adversary currently of Russia in its backyard, something that, of course, in Moscow they saw in a very bad light. Same thing with regard to Azerbaijan. Of course, it's seen as the backyard of the Russians. Turkey doesn't really regard the Russians as that big of a threat, seemingly, if it's willing to play as an arbitrator and be actively also in the operations during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And we see also the situation in Libya, being an opposing side, Syria as well. How do you see this actually evolve, considering the fact that the United States is seemingly seeking to pivot to the east, and Russia and Turkey are quite frankly very interested in bolstering their capacity in the region?
So we have to look back several centuries, not only several days. People are now marking the bicentennial of Napoleon's death. After Napoleon, Germany and Russia were the two rivals trying to shape Europe's geography and history, and Turkey was aligned with Germany against Russia. And we won't go into the entire history of the Crimean War and the rest. But we are back to Crimea now, and the Russians have succeeded in making their invasion of the Crimea and Donbass a fait accompli. It has taken place 7 years ago when Joe Biden was vice president. This is one of the most formative experiences of his time as Barack Obama's number two, and he wants at least to stop what he sees as Russian expansionism. But from the Russian point of view, it's a success because this is the status quo now. The Turks, and the Black Sea was mentioned here, along with the naval maneuvers. For the Turks, of course, they know that they are holding the Russians at the Straits, the Monterey Convention notwithstanding. The Russians have to go through the Straits in order to get to the Mediterranean. So it's the old game. This is not the great game of Afghanistan. This is another great game in the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, because we here are land people. We always think about armies, or at least air forces. But this is an area for navies. This is a Mediterranean theater. And Turkey is a great naval power. Of course, its contribution to NATO was first as the largest land force after the United States, and its contribution during the Korean War. But one of its most strategic assets is its navy, plus the fact that if you look at it from the Russian point of view, it's the equivalent of Cuba, which is why President Kennedy quietly took out the Jupiter missiles in 1962 as in return for Khrushchev taking out his missiles out of Cuba. So if the Cold War is coming back in any shape or form, Turkey will have a center seat on this stage.
Indeed. Mentioning, of course, Germany and Turkish historic alliances. Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, about a couple of weeks ago, he visited Berlin, met with Heiko Maas, the foreign minister of Germany, during which Germany was quite eager to portray European-Turkish relations as bolstering, as being more positive than the year prior, of course, during the height of tensions between Greece and Turkey. Do you see the current efforts to somehow revive a certain alliance between Germany and Turkey is at the same time due to the various tensions that are ongoing with Russia and seeing Turkey as a possible arbitrator in such a reality? And how do you see the current makeup also on a regional scale? What are the implications?
Well, I think the tensions in Ukraine definitely spooked a couple EU and NATO countries in the Baltics. I think Turkey coming to Ukraine's aid, being the first country to express solidarity with Ukraine, Zelensky's first trip being to Ankara right after tensions were sparked, sent a strong message to many countries showing that Ukraine is counting on Turkey to be an important supporter. Now, we talked about during this program, Turkey being afraid of Russia. I don't think Turkey's afraid of Russia militarily. I think it doesn't want direct confrontation with Russia. And due to this proxy confrontation, it's been manageable on the foreign policy level because all conflict between Russia and Turkey over the past 5 years have been on the proxy level. And Turkey will continue to avoid direct confrontation if it's not needed. But that doesn't mean that Turkey won't support Ukraine, and that doesn't mean that Turkey restricts Russian expansion in the region. It does restrict Russian expansion. If Turkey was not in Syria right now, the whole country would be under Russian control. If Turkey was in Libya, the whole country most likely would be under Russia's control via Haftar. So Turkey does limit Russian expansion. And I think these Baltic states have seen that Turkey backing Ukraine, seeing Turkey as a very important bulwark against Russian expansion. So I think the Germans see that as well. Many EU countries see that as well. And at the end of the day, Turkey's in the region. So if there was any type of high readiness maneuvering needed to counter Russia, before any NATO troops could actually move into the region. When we look at the infrastructure of Eastern Europe, how hard it is to get NATO tanks into the region, NATO warships into the region, NATO aircraft into the region, could take months. The Turks are already in the region. So when we look at this from a NATO perspective, a high readiness level perspective, Turkey is very, very important to countering Russia. It was very important to countering the Soviets in the 70s and 80s, and it's still important to countering Russia right now.
Professor Khanin, your take on this, and really from a Russian perspective, how do the Russians see this? Do they truly see Ankara also as an obstacle to their regional interests?
Well, in fact, in your short question, there are three questions. I would translate it this way. How Russians see and what they're happy or unhappy about in concern of their relations on the Turkish track, what they're able to do, the second question, and the third question, what they in fact doing and intend to do. Let me address very briefly to each three of them. Please. So Russians are unhappy with the behavior of Turkey concern of the Russian allies or clients in Libya and Turkey and Syria. I'm sorry, here in the Middle East. So all this that is called unfraternal relations between these groups. Actually, they are not accepted in Moscow in a positive way. Secondly, Russians are not very happy in terms of the effectivity, which is in fact effectivity in the full meaning of this word, of the Turkish position in Nagorno-Karabakh crisis. In fact, Turkey succeeded to infiltrate there and to capture the territory, capture the niche, which was in Moscow they saw as a point of exclusive interest of Russia. And third, Russians are not happy in concern of the Turkish position, as colleagues said, concerning Ukraine and the Kyiv behavior vis-a-vis Moscow. As we know, during the Vladimir Zelensky visit to Turkey in October 2020, both sides signed a declaration of steps in terms of the deoccupation of the Crimea. They were talking about the presence of Russia and Russian allies in eastern Ukraine. So Ukrainians are buying Turkish military armament and other production. So Ukrainians signed the contract of buying of the various so-called game-changing armament from Turkey. So each time when Mr. Erdoğan is talking about the escalation, still he makes a stress that Turkish sympathy on the Ukrainian rather than Russian side. That is why Russia is not happy about it, and in principle, in Russia, they are discussing the question whether Turkey is serious. In Ankara, they are serious by saying that if Russia has the connections, relations with the departments, with the filials of the Working Party, Labour Party of Kurdistan in Syria, and is not interested to stress them in concern of the de-escalation of the Turkish-Syrian border. So therefore, from this point of view, Turkey is able to do whatever they consider to do on this, that means Russian-Ukrainian border. In fact, that is why Russians would be able to make a substantial pressure on Turkey. But at the moment, this pressure makes very limited. Because of the fact that, as colleagues said, because of the reasons, I will not come back to them, why Russia and Turkey are interested in the mutual relations more than disagree on this or that point. So, in fact, the Ankara policy, they see it from Moscow, is use Ukraine not just or not so much against Russia, but more as to put their steps there. Concerning the economic, geopolitical, and diplomatic interest, and to have a sort of a Platzdarm in the further movement of Turkey in the areas, in the regions, mainly Turkish-speaking regions of Russian federations on the southern border of Russia. That is why Russians are actually, that's my last point I would like to raise, they, on one hand, they would like to show their dissatisfaction to Turkey, and I would say that limiting of the airspace flights, the air flights, from Moscow to Turkish territory, Turkish status, is actually a sort of an indication of Russian dissatisfaction. By the way, a recent opinion poll that was published in Russia by the Levada Center, it showed that about 44% of Russians, they believe that these flights were limited due to the COVID pandemic, but about the same share, about half, they believe that it's due to the diplomatic and geostrategic reasons. And by the way, about half of the Russians support it, despite that Turkey is a very important place for the Russian tourism. But as far as the Washington is not able to make a reset of their relations with Turkey, both in Moscow and in Ankara believe that both sides they have no way but to strengthen their relations, despite of all the disappointments and disagreement they have at the moment.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, despite disagreements, despite the challenges that may be perceived either in Ankara or in Moscow, there is a lot of cooperation there. Of course, Russia is the one which is constructing the nuclear reactor for Turkey. As was mentioned earlier, Turkey was willing to forgo, even though it might not have viewed it as such, but it was willing to forgo the F-35 aspect of things with the acquisition of the S-400. And it seems like its domestic military focus is much more developing at this stage. Of course, it is also looking for the possibilities of potentially purchasing the Sukhoi 35 or other military hardware from Russia and then upgrade it from its own domestic technological developments. How do you see the current situation with regard to Israel, with regard to the situation in Lebanon, in Syria? There's so many various aspects in this region that Turkey and Russia are seemingly aligned on.
So Turkey has been seen as very assertive over the last several years And the simplistic image or stereotype is that Erdogan's policy is half Ottoman and half Islamist. But the reality is much more pragmatic. And because of the economic problems, the currency, obviously Turkey needs a shot in the arm in order to recover some of the problems it has. And one can look at the relatively mute reaction to Biden's statement regarding the Armenian genocide. If you were to predict it ahead of this statement, you would have thought that relations will be broken, there will be a crisis. All in all, this is behind us due to Erdogan's wise decision to let it go. Of course, to react to it, but rhetorically, but not break relations about it. Now, the West, and including Israel, pays more for the F-35 and its engine because the Turks are out of the job now. They were part of the cooperative work. When work stopped because of the sanctions, there is a delay in the supply of F-35s to other customers, including perhaps Israel.
The F-35's wings were actually manufactured in Turkey.
Yes, there was a labor, a share of the division of labor between some 9 or 10 producers, Israel too. So when one looks ahead, especially as an Israeli government is going to be set up, there will be a new Israeli president, a ceremonial position in 2 months' time. There will be a good opportunity for both countries to warm their relations.
Indeed, and this relationship is very important for both countries, and it's going to have impact on any country in the region, regardless of its size or power. But unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. So I'd like to thank Mr. Erim, Professor Khanin, as well as Mr. Oren for being part of today's panel. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well. And we will see you next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.